Welcome, Rinkcast, to Season 3, Episode 24 of the Rink.com's Blackhawks Rinkcast, live from the COVID-19 studios in the quarantine bubble. Today is Tuesday, October 6th, 2020, and I'm your host, Jeff Osborn, better known on the Twitters as Puckin' Hostile.
My name is Jeff.
It's Hefe, man.
And the hater and the, Mr. Negative and all those other great things. But that being said, I'm here today with Mr. Ray Napientek. He's one of our writers, our Blackhawks writers. He's a prospect guy, and you work for FC Hockey, which is one of the premier draft guides out there on scouting players and stuff like that. So you're a good person to have on tonight to react about with the Blackhawks. But do you want to give a little bit of stuff into the FC Hockey and what you guys do over there and how
Yeah, absolutely.
How you'll be covering the draft and stuff.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. No, and it's been a slow time. I mean, any hockey fan has been waiting for the draft, right? It was almost like Christmas today. So, but yeah, over at FC Hockey, NHL entrydraft.com. A lot of good information going on over there. We've got some great hockey minds. I'm learning a ton. Just working there and having some fun with it. A lot of guys that have gone on and have gone on to pro scouting jobs, which is awesome. But put in a lot of legwork. We've got guys and gals all over the world, working on getting views on players and stuff like that. I personally just work with USHL, getting some views with the American leagues and stuff like that. So, but yeah, absolutely, no, appreciate that plug.
Yeah, and also I do want to say before I introduce the next person who you're not going to see but you're going to hear, I want to shout out to Eddie Van Halen. Rest in peace, Eddie Van Halen, one of my favorite guitarists, and he passed away today, long bout with cancer. The intro song on the podcast part of this is going to actually be Little Guitarist from Van Halen. So you're not going to hear that on the live part here, but you'll hear it on the podcast part of it. But Aaron Goldschmidt, I think, is in the background still in his Cale Makar pajamas. Hello, sir.
Gentlemen.
How are you doing?
Doing great. Having a good night. Drafted another good defenseman. So pretty happy with that.
Yeah, and you're not talking about the Blackhawks.
I'm not. No, you guys. No, I'm not talking about the Blackhawks.
You stopped yourself mid-sentence.
I'm trying to be nice to Ray. We have a nice working relationship.
It's hard to be nice to Ray, but
would be first for both of you. That would be.
Yeah, for sure. So, well, let's not mince many words. Let's get this done tonight. Let's talk about what we have to talk about. The Blackhawks at number 17, they selected Lukas Reichel, who is the son of Martin Reichel and the uncle of Robert Reichel, who I remember is a Calgary Flames fan in the 80s and 90s. Robert Reichel, I remember him well, but that is the uncle of Lukas Reichel. Now, Eric went into a whole lot of detail about he did a lot of draft profiles and stuff, and we had them up. We really appreciate all that. And he did a lot of hard work. And Stan Bowman just went kind of right off the board, picked a guy who was probably more suited for later in the 20s, maybe even early in the second round, and with Lukas Reichel. Now, from what I'm hearing, from what they were saying on the broadcast and stuff, Lukas Reichel is basically, to me, sounds like Brandon Saad 2.0. Kind of responsible in both zones, not gonna really knock you over with his offensive talent, but he's not gonna kill you with terrible defensive talent either. Just maybe a solid top six winger, kind of maybe in that Brandon Saad mold. What do you think, Ray?
I think you're spot on. I mean, obviously that was a name that really doesn't come up. I think at 17, though, you're at such a point there that you could almost argue that the 15, 16 guys that you would have had before that all went. It was almost like, it was exactly the guys that you thought were going to go 15, 16. And then, at 17, I thought there was a few guys that were, in that 17 through 20 range. And then, obviously with Lukas, all accounts is, like you said, he's responsible. He plays the game right. He goes to the tough areas. He's willing to go to the net. You talk about, like you said, Brandon Saad 2.0, who we thought was, Hossa, very light, So, for me, I thought it was a a solid pick overall. You're surprised, you start to scramble a little bit with some names, but those are the guys that help you win games, and then, when you think about the success we've had with guys like him in the playoffs, where you don't have to put up, a point a game to be successful, in the corners and tough areas in the front of the net. So for me, I'm always somebody that, at first you're always kind of shocked it's like, oh, what'd they do? What's going on? How many other guys did they pass up? And then you kind of take a step back and you see kind of where he fits in. You see what maybe the team was, Stan was thinking, the team was thinking, the scouts were thinking. He's got a great hockey IQ, comes from a great hockey family. So, I mean, you definitely can't argue with that.
Yeah. When you started kind of talking about that, the first words that came to my mind were safe pick.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's not the guy you're going to throw out there that's going to kill you on the defensive side of the ice. He's not the kind of guy that also may not drive the offensive play in the ice. But
Right.
So he's a responsible forward. I don't know. To me, I don't know how much he's going to really improve this team. He might create some of that middle of the lineup depth, but I don't know. Like, is he going to be your number one left wing in 4 years on the Chicago Blackhawks? I don't really know that that's the case. So, yeah. Aaron, I know you're there. You got any thoughts on Reichel?
I mean, I know for a fact that I was like, all right, who's Bowman going to pick? Probably some guy that none of us have heard of, a few picks back, reach. And lo and behold, there it was. But I think there's reason for Blackhawks fans to be optimistic about this pick. They've done really well with their European scouts, bringing in a lot of talent. The last European player to come over in this range was Teuvo Teravainen. So I'm not trying to say that this is a bad pick. This is kind of like a TBD for the Hawks. It could be a really great pick. You just have to wait and see. You got to see him at camp and see what he can do. But hopefully he's a skilled player who can skate, who can fit into the offense somewhere in the top 9 and do something for you. But I think there's reason to just be okay with it.
Yeah, it's not flashy. It's not going to get you jumping out of your seat, but they are going to need depth. They don't have depth. Unfortunately, depth is when you usually go second, third round, not first round. So it was kind of odd, but I do want to make sure that all the viewers and everything get to see my little draft board here. So I'm going to move to the side a little bit, and you can see my draft board there. Stan Bowman needs to get a small puck moving defenseman, a long-term high risk project. I don't know if that could be it right there. 6th or 7th round goalie that never pans out. A mid-draft insignificant position move. Let's see, bunch of guys that flame out and disappear. Re-sign a bunch of former Blackhawks and trade guys for little or nothing. So he's pretty much hit a couple of these on the board already, and he hasn't even hit the second day of the draft yet.
I'll tell you what, Gate, it was extremely difficult watching Yaroslav Askarov fall and go to the Nashville Predators when this is somebody that the Hawks could really use, and they probably could have had if they didn't beat the Edmonton Oilers. And it's hard because this is somebody who is being compared to Carey Price, and there's no guarantee that he's going to be Carey Price. I mean, Spencer Knight also got drafted last year in the first round, and he got high praise too, but it's hard knowing what could have been. And what you could have traded up, you could have done a lot of things, but Stan's got a plan for goalie, and no one really seems to know what that is.
Yeah, well, that was the other thing that was kind of interesting with this draft is there weren't really any moves until the early 20s, just past the Blackhawks. I think where Calgary made a couple moves. But sometimes you expect to see more moves earlier in the draft. And I don't know if it's because teams were kind of afraid with how the setup was. It's not like you can just walk over to the table like these general managers are used to getting up, walking over to a table that's 12 feet from where they're sitting, talking to a guy, agreeing to a trade and doing that. Now they're having to make phone calls or, however they're doing that, whether they're using a private messaging system or something like that. But I think honestly, that's why there weren't a lot of moves early on, is the way this draft was set up. And the general managers kind of said, screw it. Like, let's just go ahead and get through this. And, instead of, maybe the clock ends up going over and then the next team can jump ahead of you and pick and things like that. When you're trying to nail down a trade in 5 minutes, like that was my opinion. I don't know. Did you get that feeling, Ray?
I could probably see that. I mean, we were there. One thing that Aaron and I could probably agree on, which is probably the only one, when Jake Ottinger was traded, or Chicago traded that spot and Ottinger was picked, I saw Stan get up, walk over. They had the conversation. Next thing you know, the trade's happening. You just don't have that flow to it. You don't know how it's working, stuff along those lines. Is it easy to get a hold of somebody? Moving forward, what's the cap going to look like? How are we going to build and structure our team? I can see where a GM may not want to say, man, we're going to get rid of a piece. And then at the, think, man, I kind of got forced into that. I wasn't able to think about it. The time was on the clock. I'm not in a stadium. There's kind of weird things going on. It's 2020, right? That's the saying. So I can see that happen. I think you might see, some more movement here in that second round where you get maybe some guys pulling up where somebody in that first round fell. I think you might see, a goalie or two maybe go early here in that second round where it gives you a little bit of time to go back to the hotel, go back to your room, talk to some GMs here in between the first and second period and kind of regroup. So I think you might see a little bit of action here, early on in that second, just a prediction. But yeah, I could see it being really difficult for GMs to have that sit down and have that conversation and too many moving parts, which is fine. It's the world we live in right now.
Yeah, and it's so, like, really honestly, as far as the Blackhawks go, there's not a whole lot to really talk about as far as the draft goes. I mean, we could touch on just a couple of other things that have gone on. We haven't podcasted in probably a month just because we've been trying to decompress from all that other stuff that was going on. But as far as the draft goes, like, there were a couple of, surprises. Some Detroit kind of went off the board a little bit, picking Lukas Reichel at 4th. I mean, not that there was a terribly off the board pick, but he was kind of there were different debates by a lot of different scouts and writers, and some people had him in the 20s, some people had him in the top 3 or 4. And Detroit just went and got their guy. I mean, Stevie Y, he did it last year and he did it again this year. They went and got their guy. They're not, I kind of admire that because I get so tired of teams like, you got to pick the best player available. Well, if you've picked 30 defensemen in a row and then, a defenseman is the best player, but you got a forward here that's really close, maybe you should go for the forward and start filling out the other parts of your organization that are lacking. Because if you have 50 defensemen and none of them are going to be able to get through the system because it gets log jammed, and you have to count on, say, Stan Bowman to then make a follow-up trade. And I've said this for like 2-3 years. I don't trust Stan to pick a player that's good, like, say, maybe last year, Bowen Byram, and then having to make that follow-up trade of maybe Adam Boqvist or Nicholas Beaudin and getting even value back for that player. I think it's kind of a wasted pick. You might as well just pick the guy who was, maybe 2 spots down, because you're going to lose value anyway from a player that you trade away. So that's kind of my feeling on that. I'm not saying that, every time you gotta draft for need. Like, if the Blackhawks would have, what Schneider was still on the board, I believe. I think he went. Right?
Yeah, went to the Rangers at 19. Yep.
Yeah. So, like, he was still on the board. Like, they don't necessarily have that kind of defenseman. I could see it, but I wouldn't really love it. I really prefer that they start stocking up this forward group. And on the podcast that I was on the other day, I picked Dylan Holloway because there were some crazy picks in that draft. Like Nico Dawes went to Carolina early in the 10 range. And I'm like, wow, I didn't expect to hear that guy's name till the end of the second round. But the Carolina guy wanted a goalie and he went out and got a goalie. So, there's some craziness, but Dylan Holloway was the guy I picked. And I kind of associated that with, like, he's in Wisconsin. Stan probably gets to see a lot of Wisconsin. He knows Tony Granato. The whole thing, the whole connection between the Blackhawks and Wisconsin seemed to make sense. And then on top of that, at the end, Wyatt Kalynuk, a defenseman who played at Wisconsin last year, played with Holloway.
Mhm.
You know, it seemed like to me that would have all, you know, kind of made sense. But Holloway went earlier to the Oilers, and maybe the Blackhawks were going to pick him. I don't know. Were you going to say something, Aaron?
No, I was just gonna say something that we should probably chat about is Cole Perfetti dropping from the 4 range to 10, and similar to Cole Caulfield last year, dropped from like 5 to 15. Teams really hesitant about taking smaller-ish players around 5'8", 5'9", guys that can score 40 goals in the regular season and 0 in the playoffs to brink it. But
You know how my feelings on that.
yeah, but I just think it's always going to be a thing. Is this guy could have the most skill in the world, but in this physical small ice of North America, what are you going to do? And somebody generally takes a chance on them just because of their skill level, passing, etc. In the teens, but I don't know if I feel bad. I would hate to be in the position to make that kind of decision.
I mean, that's bad for the Blackhawks. They're going to see Cole Perfetti how many times a year they're going to have to face him. And, you know, maybe Patrick Laine won't be there, but I mean, he's a good, you know, Perfetti's a good player. And then, like we kind of touched on just a little bit earlier, the Blackhawks, if they would have picked where they would have finished the season, they probably would have been at 9 or 10. Yaroslav Askarov would have been there. They could have picked their goalie of the future. Instead, he ends up falling all the way to the Nashville Predators. So now the Blackhawks are going to have to face him how many times a year? You know, they went that little stunt they pulled with, you know, beating Edmonton. Yay, yippee to you. You know, you got your playoff experience, but how many of those players are going to even be around the next time the Blackhawks make the playoffs or are at least significant in the playoffs? We don't know. I mean, you can't tell them to lose, but it probably would have been a better scenario for them to lose and be able to pick, you know, something instead of just maybe a guy who's going to be a good depth forward, not top tier, but, you know, 1B tier maybe, to a guy who could have been the franchise goalie for the next decade.
Yeah, and the other thing that stood out to me in the draft was obviously Calgary trading down twice and getting a couple of third-round picks. But I watched the tape on this Connor Zary kid. This guy's nasty from Kamloops, and he's just going to be playing with Matthew Tkachuk and playing behind Sean Monahan. And Ray, what's the report on him? Because I think they got a lot of value at 24 with him.
Yeah, they got a lot of value there. I mean, he's somebody that I could have seen 12 picks earlier. I mean, really, you know, he's not the fastest of skaters, but he's definitely not slow. He's just a little fireball. I mean, he plays a very good game, pucks on his stick a lot. You know, he's dangerous in a lot of different areas. I mean, he can score, but man, I think he sees the ice well. But he's that type of player that I just kind of, you know, he's a firecracker. You know, every time he's on the ice, it's 100 miles per hour. He's going to go after you. I think, you know, defensively, and you could say that's a lot of, you know, about, you know, half of these picks in the first round. You know, hey, defensively, you know, hey, still got to be a little bit more consistent and stuff like that. But it's easy to be offensive in juniors, obviously. But I thought that was great value to move back and still get somebody that they probably, you know, could have been off the board at 12.
Yeah, I mean, and Ray, I want to give a little shout out to our boy Brendan Brisson, huh?
Just saw that.
Going 29th to the Vegas Golden Knights from the Chicago Steel.
Yep.
So
yeah, congrats to him and congrats to the Steel organization. I mean, they are doing
Ryan Hardy, yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Good guy, great guy.
Everybody up and down in that organization has been nothing but top notch. And you talk about an organization that has a focus, has a philosophy, and it's like you're either in or you're out, which is awesome to see him succeed doing that.
Yeah, they are all in. Like they're not wasting any time. They're going out and get top end players, and you know, Brendan Brisson is one of them, and they're going to have a couple of guys probably go in the second round, and then next year you got our boy Owen Power, right?
Yeah, Owen. He's supposed to be at the University of Michigan, NCAA. You know, I heard today, or maybe it was yesterday, talking about playing some games, which is good. Sean Farrell should go. Sam Colangelo should go. I mean, you got guys up and down that line, and Matthew St.
Ifali,
Yeah,
that his name?
DePaul. I mean, they've got guys up and down that lineup that can really go. I think the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh round, it's going to be a lot of preference where you might see a few more names that Steele could end up with five guys.
And the goalie that it looks like an outside prediction the Blackhawks could go after.
Yeah, he would be solid. Victor out of Sweden. I mean, he's somebody that isn't on a lot of draft boards, but when you watch him play, he's structurally, he's good. He's in good position. I think he plays well. He can work on his quickness. He can work on, some glove. But for me, if you just say, oh, he was good because the Steel were good, you didn't watch him. I mean, he didn't really dive in there. And obviously, I get to see all their games, if not most. So, I mean, that's definitely different. But he would be somebody that if he came off the board late, I wouldn't be surprised.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
Aaron, you got any things you want to add in? Any guys that you noticed that you want to say anything about?
Not really. I was a little shocked that Sanderson went 5. I knew that they wanted to differentiate there with Ottawa with another pick, but I was really praying that he didn't go to Nashville, because that is the biggest, most typical Nashville pick. But yeah, other than that, I thought it was a decent draft. One thing I mentioned in our chat was, how far ahead the LA Kings are. They won their cups. They decided to reload and retool. They still have their big contracts on the books, but they traded off everything they could. They took Turcotte last year, and now they add a huge centerman up the middle in Byfield, who looks really great. If they can,
he's going to be a beast.
They have.
He's still a kid. It's nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah. They have so much talent in their pipeline, and it's so hard to not be jealous of what they've got going on, thinking that could be the Hawks. If the Hawks just owned it and said, you know what, this isn't working, let's try to just get back to playoff contention the right way. What could they do? I mean, their rebuild could look a lot better than what LA has got right now. Mm-hmm. If they flip some assets, but it's just frustrating watching a team like LA get back to where they should be. And, we know that it's going to take several years if the Hawks eventually decide to do that.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing about the Hawks. Like, everyone was like, oh, Rocky, dollar bill's dead. Rocky's going to come in. He's going to change this. And, for a while there, it was like, hey, Rocky's changed the culture and all this stuff. And now, as the Blackhawks aren't as competitive because they've hung on to veterans too long, they've these nostalgia contracts and all this garbage and nonsense that's going on. Now the Blackhawks are more concerned about, pitching their season tickets and this hope in some of these players. And one of them was Dylan Sakura, who was traded away. That was, quote unquote, their trade deadline acquisition 2 years ago. And now you've traded him away for a guy who you traded away many years previously, and now he's a Chris Versteeg reclamation project that's probably going to play most of the season in Rockford, despite what all the experts want to go out there and think. Brandon Perry is going to spend most of this upcoming season in Rockford or with the Rockford Ice Hogs, just like Chris Versteeg was going to do. So that's just, part of the fact. And, their pipeline, they got a lot of defensemen, but do they got a lot of defensemen that are going to defend? And do they have a goalie? I mean, that was another thing that was kind of brought up today. That, a lot of the choices I'm not really I'm not fond of at all. I don't think Matt Murray just, he doesn't have the balls really, to put it bluntly. He folded in Pittsburgh behind a defense that was better than what the Blackhawks have. And how do you think he's going to look behind the Blackhawks? He's going to look just as bad. He was a sub 900 save percentage, and so was Braden Holtby, and then Anton Hudobin. Okay, he's kind of a system goalie that's in his mid 30s. He might come in and give you, be able to stop the puck for you. But are you going to pay big money for that? No. Obviously, the Blackhawks showed they're not going to pay big money for a goalie. So who's left? Darcy Kemper. You're going to trade for Darcy Kemper. This guy has been, passed around the league a lot like Devin Dubnyk before him, found a system that he played well in, and now, like, don't trust it. Don't trust it. I don't, if they give up assets for Darcy Kemper, in the end, you're going to be disappointed. The best thing you can do is try to find the cheapest reasonable option to get you on a bridge, get you as a bridge to something else, and give you a couple years to try and figure this out, because right now it's a mess. Corey Crawford, they offered him $3.5 million. Looks like he may walk to free agency. He could still end up coming back, but they're really playing cheap with the goalies, and you only have Colin Delia and Kevin Lankinen behind that defense, who now has traded Alimata away. We really didn't even talk about that much. Today I saw the thing about Marc-Andre Fleury, and I'm not a big Marc-Andre Fleury guy. I think he's a great individual. He's a great teammate and all that stuff, but he's getting up there in age. But it looks like that Vegas may be willing to give him away for, and eat half of his salary and give you a second round draft pick for, to take him off their hands, and the Blackhawks might be able to unload something. No, not Brent Seabrook, but the Blackhawks maybe will unload something back to them for that. I could handle that. That's reasonable. Marc-Andre Fleury is a pretty good goalie. Before Robin Leonard showed up, he was holding it together pretty well outside of injuries. And, he could hang in there for a year or two with Colin Delia behind you, and you're not going to get killed. You're probably still going to pick in the lottery, but you're not going to get completely killed. It's not going to cost you a ton of money. You get an extra second round draft pick, which Stan loves his second round draft picks. He loves them, because if he doesn't have one, he's going to do everything in his power to get one. And now, if he could have two this year, that would be even better. So, I mean, that's just kind of a quick synopsis of what's going on here with this team.
Yeah, Marc-Andre Fleury would be fine. I mean, obviously there'd have to be some retained money. I think, like Aaron was talking about, the Kings, they bottomed out on the fly with good players, with Kopitar, with Doughty. And, people were saying, we still have to keep winning with Kane. We still have to keep winning with Taves. And Keith is, still serviceable, even at his age, and how many miles he has on his tires is unbelievable. And they're able to do that, and yeah, these players still have to come along. Turcotte and Byfield still need to be good, but they're building the foundation for the next run, where the Hawks are still just stuck, the 24th team to get in. Hey, NHL did everything they could to get Chicago in. Man, I would have given up a week's salary for them not to get in. Just to say, hey, man, that's fine. But then once you're in, you can't tell a professional hockey player go lose. That's going to happen. We wouldn't even want to do that. I don't want to lose to Aaron and, checkers, so that's something that, that's part of it. That's the game. That's the card you're dealt. You went out and won. Fantastic. You got some experience, but it seems like the Hawks are just kind of spinning their wheels. You give away all those draft picks to win right now, which is what you need to do back when they were winning. You have to give up picks. You got to try and win right now, because you could see when the door closes, it slams really, really hard. And that's where I think a lot of the fans that kind of got in with, it's, hey, we can still win it. And it's like, no, it's going to be tough to really win it with this team, but you can do it on the fly. You can still have those 2-3 years where you still have Kane, you still have Taves, back of the, their contracts. Kirby Doc, another top line guy. Maybe if it would have been a goalie this year, where you kind of pile on, you could get back to competing. But for me right now, if you ended up with Marc-Andre Fleury over Crawford, that's fine. That's something where, the defensemen are looking back at a Stanley Cup champion, a veteran, a guy that can still play in this league at a really high level. Matt Murray would have been, probably no. Braden Holtby probably no. They've been average, below average, bad for seasons, so I mean for the last couple seasons. So man, it would be tough it would be tough if they went out with the goalies that they have in their system right now. I think a really long year.
I got to think something's happening tomorrow. He's gonna have to make some kind of moves. If you don't make
that's the game. I mean, that's how it works. You don't have to, you're not icing a team tomorrow, but you can't be going out with those goalies, that's for sure.
Yeah, and then you hit. I just could see. I mean, you got to make more moves. The Mata thing. I mean, everyone's jumping up and down and everything, and hooting and hollering and having parades about Ali Ma getting out of town and then not having to buy him out. But the bottom line is, the next 2 years they're going to have to pay more of his salary on the cap than they would have if they would have bought him out.
Mhm.
They're not saving money for 2 seasons on this. So, jump up and down, hoot and holler that you got something, an ECHL forward back. You basically gave a 4, 5, 6, defenseman, a 3, 4, 5, 6 defenseman away for a guy for a nobody. I'm sorry, Mr. Morrison, but you're going to be in Indianapolis this year, and then maybe when your contract's up, you're not going to be with Chicago anymore. So, he's given away a lot of stuff for not a lot in return, and that's a lot like what happened with Teuvo Teravainen and Brian Bickle and all these situations that he got himself into, and then he has to buy himself out of by giving away decent players. It's frustrating. It's frustrating.
I got a question for you guys.
Yeah.
I've been kind of on the outside looking in with the Hawks the last year, and I just want to know, of the last several years, seems like the best teams have a style. They have a certain way that they play. They have a coach that enforces that way. They have a GM whose job it is to fill in players that fit that system, right? And the Hawks were great at that. They had a core, they filled in around the edges, and for the longest time they got by just putting the right pieces together, moving on from guys, making trades, etc. So I'm asking you, this is not a Joe Quenneville type roster anymore. This is Jeremy Carlton, whatever, and Stan Bowman's, leftovers with a bunch of Band-Aids on it. Who are the Blackhawks? Because it just seems like they're a bunch of guys skating behind Patrick Kane.
They're like the misfit toys.
Yeah, bunch of Band-Aids. I think you said it perfectly.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, yeah, literally a Band-Aid with Calvin DeHaan. And, a lot of people forget that Andrew Shaw's even still on the team anymore. And, they're all injury prone. That was why I was afraid. I was kind of afraid. Who was it that dropped? LaPierre, was it? The one, Hendrix LaPierre, who had a lot of concussion problems. Yeah. I was really afraid Stan was going to go for the, high risk, high reward kind of pick like that. The guy, because that's kind of how Adam Boquist was. He was a little higher pick, but he was, he had concussion issues. And, he was kind of like, the wild stallion. You couldn't control him. He had a lot of skill, that kind of thing. So that's kind of how I was afraid they were going to go. But yeah, back to your original point, they're like the land of misfit toys right now. They're not going to be able to upgrade much this year. They're barely going to be begging a goalie to come in and play. How can you expect any more than a lottery pick again this year? Mm-hmm. What about you, Ray?
Yeah, Aaron, you got Kane, you got some younger guys, that you think you could build around in a Doc or a Boquist and Kubalik. And then you've got bottom roster guys. And that was fine when you were winning games. And like you said, you're just filling in guys around that core. And that core was special. You don't win 3 Stanley Cups on accident. You maybe win 1 on accident, but they still have those bottom guys. And that's the problem, is they just didn't want to bottom out. They're celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the 2010 Cup, and half the team was still on the team. Some guys were still on the team. It was like, what's your identity? Where are we going? You missed the playoffs 2 years in a row. Now, hey, you got lucky. That's the thing, is that when that core was special, you could have filled it around with a lot of different players. You could put a lot of different players around that core, and you would have won, Stanley Cups like you did. But, now that core is older, Kane's your best player by far, from that standpoint, to put players around him. You got 1 or 2, 3 younger pieces, but then you've got all that bottom feeder guys that, yeah, they're fine. They're NHL hockey players, but they're not guys that are going to help you consistently push for a Stanley Cup. That's for darn sure. So yeah, they don't have an identity. That's definitely a sure thing. They're just kind of a hodgepodge of players right now. And that's part of not bottoming out.
It's funny to think that Joel Quenneville despised Trevor Daley, could not stand Nick Leddy, So he would be the first one to give Adam Boquist the bus ticket to Rockford.
Yeah,
Probably would.
he would.
So
Yeah,
it's
you're
hard.
right.
It's hard to close your eyes and think about this Blackhawks team and how many guys would actually make it past Quenneville's test. How many of these guys would Quenneville say, "Get this guy off my team. I have no use for him.
Alex Nylander.
Get him out. What does he do?"
I mean, Alex Nylander probably wouldn't have made it 9 games into last season.
He wouldn't have made it past prospect camp.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have made it down the hallway to the ice.
Yeah,
It's just hard to imagine, like, what are these guys doing? Who are these players? Why are they here? Why are you bringing them in? Why are they in the NHL is the question.
Well,
and how do they fit into your style? And I kind of feel bad for Colleton because
I feel
he's given this raw deal where he has to, make shit into gold. And I think he did okay. I mean, he beat the Edmonton Oilers, but we're finding out that wasn't that much of an accomplishment.
Well, he's in over his head as well. I mean, he's in over his head. He was just he not only was he probably not ready to be an NHL head coach, but then he's given a roster of a bunch of misfit toys and told put this together and make it work. And it didn't work, and it's still really not working. I mean, Edmonton is what Edmonton is. They were not a good team with not good goaltending. When their best defenseman was really hurt. When McDavid and Draisaitl weren't doing the scoring, no one was doing the scoring. They were in worse situation than the Blackhawks.
Mm-hmm.
So, Blackhawks probably should have beat them. But the fact of the matter is the Blackhawks shouldn't have even been there anyway. They're just not that good of a team.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be that good of a team next year. And if that's us being negative, I'm sorry, but that's the truth. And I'm not gonna BS and lie. None of us are. I mean, that's why we all like the group that we have here. We're all kind of on the same page. We understand. We see it for what it is, and it's just like they're a big red shiny turd right now.
And it's hard watching the Central Division, have people continually go to the Stanley Cup from this division, and watch them draft players and get better every year around you. That's difficult. The Avs are in this division. They're tough. Stars just went to the Stanley Cup. Blues won the Stanley Cup. I mean,
Nashville was really good for a while.
Winnipeg was threatening. Minnesota was going to the playoffs almost every year.
Man, Minnesota's Minnesota. They stink.
That's true. But all these teams are still getting top talent into their system, and they can develop. So,
yeah, development is a huge part of that. And JC walked into a tough situation. It really should have been a retread coach that had a Stanley Cup ring as an assistant, or had a Stanley Cup back in the day. And I mean, when you walk into a locker room and you've got Keith Seabrook, Kane Taves, you got these guys that they got more rings than you have fingers and toes, and you're trying to change the system. You're trying to earn respect. You're trying to get these young kids developed. I mean, that's hard to do, man. I mean, that is really hard to do as a young coach that doesn't have any chops. I mean, he had nothing. Yeah, he's won in other places, but for him to walk into that situation was difficult. And that's the thing. You look at all those other teams, Aaron, and you talk about Dallas, you talk about Colorado, and you talk about Winnipeg was good, but none of them have won it. So I mean, the Hawks can get back to that level. I don't think they can. They could get back to a Dallas level. They get back to a Colorado. I mean, Colorado could be very good. It's hard for me to say that, but they got a lot of young talent. But you talk about Nashville, who is year in and year out, they're going to compete. But you've got to be able to develop that talent. It's got to be in the system now, where before it was, hey, we've got our core, just pour in around it. Now it's got to come through the system, and that's where you think like a New York Rangers that are doing it on the fly. Got lucky with the number 1 pick, the LA Kings, getting some really good players in there that you could kind of rebuild on the fly, bring up through the system, because you can't always be trading guys in when that core is older and that core isn't as talented as it used to be. But man, JC walked into a real tough spot. I'll give him.
Can you imagine if the Blackhawks didn't get lucky last year in the draft and move up? They'd be really even worse this year. or in the next coming years, because they probably would have picked a guy who would have been 2 years out, maybe at the 12 spot or wherever they were at. Maybe probably 2 years out, and so you wouldn't even have that. You wouldn't even have a Curry Doc type player who is fairly dominant in the playoffs or at least the postseason. They'd really be hurt. They really were they were gift wrapped, a player that that gave them gave them a little hope for a couple of seasons. But that's really all it is hopes and dreams. So
Here's
let's shift gears. Oh, go ahead.
One last question. Why weren't the Hawks trading down twice? Why didn't we get 2 third-round picks? You don't think Reichel could have been there in the mid-20s? Like,
yeah,
there are a lot
that's
of
a
nice
good point.
pieces in the 20s. Why aren't we picking up the phone?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, who else went in the 20s?
Curious to see.
LaPierre, Zeri, Neighbors, Perot,
Perot was
Brisson, Bork. Yeah, any of those guys. I mean, could be on par with who they picked.
And last thing about the draft, shout out to the Germans of Deutschland. Nice seeing some different names in North America.
Yeah, for sure. Let's shift gears just a little bit, and I'll let Ray kind of take this a little bit. Where do you see them going? I don't know much more past the first round. I think they may pick a goalie in the second, third round. We've seen maybe Joel Bloomquist, I believe, who is the second goalie ranked overall. And then there's Nico Dawes. There's another goalie. So maybe they may pick, a couple of goalies in this, which they probably should because they don't have any in the system. But maybe a couple forwards. I'm sprinkle a couple defensemen in. What do you think? Who are some guys that we could maybe keep an eye on for tomorrow?
Yeah, Blomqvist would be good out of Finland. Actually did catch 2 of his games online this year. Very technically sound, good goalie. The Finnish goalies come out, with different training. You can read about it. The Goalie Guild does a great job, talking about, Finnish goalies and stuff like that. He's somebody I think could be on the board. There's a bunch of forwards I think that they could still probably have a pretty good, idea. And I'm just trying. Ridley Gregg just went off. Was born. Brendan Brisson, Bork, Weisblatt. So I mean, there's still some really good forwards. I think that the Hawks can really have their eyes on. But I personally would be eyeing that goaltender. I don't think it would maybe be a Dawes that early. They might surprise. I think I could see some teams moving up here in the early second round. Now that they're able to look at their boards and go, crap, this guy was 14th on our board. He's still there at 34. Stuff along those lines. But man, I would really be eyeing that goaltender. I wouldn't be shocked if they came away with 2 goaltenders. To be completely honest, I think that's something that Stan struggled at. I think it's something that you could say Chicago has struggled at, even though Corey was homegrown. That was a long time ago.
2004, yeah.
Josh Eunice and Corey Crawford at camp. Those are names that, that was a long time
Joe
ago.
Fallon.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. So, if you get yourself that goalie here in the second round, you feel comfortable with him, and then you get that 4th or 5th round, you go with, Dominic from last year, who I thought was probably a little bit of a stretch. There's some goalies ahead of him in my mind, but if they went with another forward, I wouldn't be shocked as well. I think there's a few on the board that they definitely have their eyes on. I mean, you got Thomas Bordelot from, the development team. I think you got, I'm trying to think, Lucas Cormier, did he go? Cormier,
I don't think so.
Board. Well, he's a defenseman. Sorry.
Colangelo too. He's still on the board.
Yeah,
we talked about him
Colangelo
earlier.
on the board. Yeah, I mean, there's some good names on here that, you wouldn't be mad with that second pick as a forward, but I would really like to see him go goaltender. Just to have that feel, man.
Me too.
We got that guy.
Clearly, being a goalie myself, I'm a little partial to goalies, but I think not just because I like goalies, but because I think the Blackhawks need goalies, and they don't have, anything in the system. And if you're not going to go out and sign them, there's only one other way to get them. Mm-hmm. That's through the draft. So
the Blues took Neighbors. That's a good pick late.
Yeah.
Ray, I got a question.
I love Sean Farrell. I'd love to see him go. That would just be That'd be a good pick at 46. What's up, Aaron?
In the NFL draft, there's always these, not, I wouldn't call them stereotypes, but reputations of schools that produce specific kinds of players, like tight ends from Iowa, offensive linemen from Notre Dame. Is there like, are there factories for these types of players based on, their OHL teams, or is it all kind of just totally random?
I think it's totally random. I mean, I was talking about like with the Finnish goalies, their development is a little bit different. They go through a much different way to get to, the juniors and then into the pro ranks. The goalie guild does a great job. Like I mentioned, why am I drawing a blank on his name?
Justin Goldman.
Justin Goldman.
Yeah, we had him on the podcast early on.
Follow
He's
on
great
Twitter,
guy.
Facebook. Yeah, absolutely. On Instagram. Does a lot of great
I thought
stuff.
I was a goalie nerd till I met him.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, he knows his stuff. So
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's so much like that, Aaron, where you get linebacker you or something along those lines, but
Sweden and Finland with the goalies for sure.
Yeah.
Those are the two places you want to look for if you're looking for a goalie. So
Yep.
Cool. Well, I think we kind of pretty much knocked it out. We don't have to stay on belabored us too much. I'm sure there's going to be plenty to wrap up with the draft coming up. Maybe, more towards the weekend or something like that. Maybe we'll do a more comprehensive wrap up of the draft, but I just wanted to kind of talk about the first round. I'm sure people are curious about it. Head over to the-rink.com. I put up a piece just earlier. It just had a couple of blurbs, some scouting blurbs from FC Hockey, Ray's boys over at FC Hockey, a blurb about Reichel, and then one from McKean's draft guide about Reichel. And then I also put some video highlights up there too. So if you want to check out, see what the Blackhawks have coming down the pipe, go check that piece out. Kind of going off subject just a little bit. And since we have Aaron on the line, I want to formally say congratulations on your first episode of the podcast, the Colorado Hockey Podcast, which was, it's a kind of a sister brother relationship around here. We're going to try and have a podcast for every division at some point in time, but Colorado was the first one to get rolling on it. And Aaron, you did a lot of hard work. So I just want to say, if people are interested in the Colorado Avalanche, go download the Colorado Hockey Rinkcast. You can look it up. If you just look it up under, iTunes or something like that, if you just type in Rinkcast, ours, they will both come up. You can, go over there. You can subscribe to it, and you can leave a review, whatever you want to do. Aaron did a great job over there. I kind of wanted to give him, open creativity, a blank slate to do whatever he'd like to do, and he took it and ran with it. So, again, I just want to, kind of give a little shout out to you, Aaron, on that. You did a great job.
Yep. Thanks, guys. It was a lot of fun. Our first episode talked a lot of Colorado Eagles with Marie Sexton. So if you haven't checked it out yet, it's pretty cool. Quick 30 minutes just talking about the season and the roster. So had a lot of fun with it.
Good. Yeah. And from what I'm hearing, you might be having some nice guests lined up coming up.
We're looking into it.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, that'll be very interesting. I'm looking forward to hearing it. Bray, your hockey knapsack on Twitter. I'm sure everyone sees, if they're listening to this, everyone has probably seen, your stuff on Twitter, because I retweet a lot of it through all of our social media channels. People may have seen, I recently fired up a Rink Seattle division, possibly. So we're going to see how that's going to go. We have a kind of a year to suss that out, but I kind of got the ball rolling on that. There's always the Toronto division. You have our NWHL, which will probably get fired up a little later on with this COVID stuff. Everything's been kind of crazy, and there's a Columbus division. So we're growing. I really like what's going on here. It's great stuff. I don't have really much more to plug right now, other than if you want to read about some more of the prospects that the Blackhawks didn't pick, you can head over to our website. Eric did a great job. Stan just kind of trumped him on that one. But there's a lot of good.
Scratched him off.
Yeah, that's what he did.
Eric,
I said that.
Eric said this guy. Okay.
That's what I said it
Lukas
beforehand. I
Reichel.
said, watch, they're going to pick some guy that Eric didn't do a full profile on. And he was like, well, I did 10 and then I touched on a couple other guys. And sure enough, Stan went off the board and picked someone that we didn't profile. But there are lots of profiles on other players there. Check him out. You can, he did a really great job.
Eric does
And
a great
I don't want that to get lost in all of this. But we'll probably have more of a comprehensive wrap up, like I said, later. So, Aaron, you got anything more you want to say?
Nope. We'll probably have an evaluation of the Avs draft on the podcast sometime over the weekend, and featuring Halifax Mooseheads defenseman Justin Barron, 6'2", 200 pounds. See you in a couple years, Ray.
It's a good pick. You can never have enough good defensemen, especially puck guys that can skate and have some.
Yeah, Colorado has a lot of them.
The best part is that you didn't need him when you're in a position where you can just take BPA.
Yeah.
Do it. Love it. Just want talent in the system.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, could have used a goalie though, right?
I'm losing the connection, guys. I'm sorry.
Corey Crawford.
Hank Lundqvist. One of them's going there. All right. Well, I don't have much more to plug. I plugged the website, plugged the podcasts and everything. Ray, you got anything else you want to plug?
Good. Yep, we got
good?
them all. Yep.
Okay, great. Well,
Cheers.
I think we're done for the night. So if you get a chance, head over iTunes, rate and review us, or comment in the Facebook section, or this will be on YouTube as well. So you can go to YouTube and you can comment there, subscribe to all of our pages. If you enjoy our content, I'd really appreciate that. And I guess with that being said, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules to download, listen, and support us. Until next episode, see you on the rink.